breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Kobe.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Kobe, he's James. Let's get started with a question. What does belonging in the workplace actually mean?
Well, I think belonging at work really boils down to whether or not I feel comfortable and confident to be able to be who I am at work, to show who I am at work. So for me, the idea of belonging, if I have to hide my opinions, or if I feel uncomfortable sharing my opinions, my experiences, my backgrounds, then I don't feel like I belong. And it really boils down to that idea of, am I able to be who I am and still be accepted and belong for me, not because I have to conform to a specific type of person.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It has a lot to do with the acceptance part of it. That because like psychological safety is the I can, like share my ideas and share what I think, and I have the safety to do that. But belonging is almost like the I can bring my thoughts and opinions, and but also I'm accepted for what I say. I can make a mistake, or I can be able to have my own perspective on things, and it be normalized, that I don't have to just go along to get along. I don't have to make sure that I'm pretending I'm someone else in order to fit in.
Yeah.
That my unique insight, perspectives, tools, quirks are not just known, but they're accepted, and that's just like that's just him, and we're cool with that.
Yeah, and you mentioned psychological safety, and I think that is foundational to belonging, but it's not the same as belonging.
Right.
I need psychological safety. We've talked about many times before, and we will talk about many times in the future, because it's foundational to everything that you need for a healthy workplace culture. But it in and of itself is not going to create belonging, because psychological safety is about the idea, do I feel that I can share my opinions or raise concerns at work without being feeling like I'm going to be penalized for it, or there's going to be some form of retribution for speaking up. And belonging is more personal than ideas, right? It's you can feel comfortable sharing your thoughts and opinions and not feel comfortable, and still feel like you have to hide who you truly are.
Right.
I mean, yes, we all have a professional persona that we use in the workplace. In many respects, my professional persona is just a slightly less messy of my version of my normal personality. But still, we do put on airs in the workplace. We do present a certain face. But how much of ourselves are we hiding? Do I have to hide my foolish sense of humor? Do I feel like I have to hide my nerdy interests? Or more importantly, do I feel like I have to hide the fact that I have a disability? For me, and I might as well say, I mean, I've talked about it in other areas. I do have a learning disability, which impacts the way that I work. It's not a visual thing. You would never know this by just talking to me, except for maybe the long pauses when I'm thinking. But do I feel comfortable bringing who I am to the workplace? And that is the essence of belonging.
Yeah, and you're right as far as the fact, like, or on a lot of things you said, because a part of it is just does the culture allow me to be me, and for
Right.
me to be kind of like, be able to be accepted. I mean, it's because like you said before, as you said, psychological safety is more about what you say, and you can, be able to speak up but still have to hide who you are. That absolutely
Right.
happens, which is why belonging is so connected to the a lot of the talk around inclusion and diversity,
Yeah.
because part of that is systemic issues in workplaces, allow people that they have to conform and assimilate, and not bring their unique perspectives based on their background, their ability, or so on to the workplace. They have to just like, leave who they are at the door and be who their company wants them to be.
Right.
And that's such a common thing, which is why belonging is such a big part of the DEI conversation, as it should be. But more than beyond that, it's really about what the culture of the workplace allows. And it needs to allow for people to be a little bit quirky, to be a little bit, unique, to have good days and have bad days, and to have different needs in other people, and that just be not tolerated, but and not even just accepted, but almost like standard practice.
Yeah. I was going to say celebrate it, but that's the wrong term or it's not the wrong term. The way that we often think about it in the workplace, I think, is wrong. Right. Like it's not about we can go too far in our enthusiasm trying to celebrate individuals, and to a point where we can actually make people feel ostracized and even less like they belong than if we just shut our mouths and accepted people for who they are.
Right. I think a good example of what it looks like to just it be normal practice is, so you shared a little bit about, you have learning disability. Those who know me, I have I've a germ phobia, and I don't hide it, but it's not an obvious thing that when you see me. But like those that I've worked with for a long time, those in our office and those in other offices in the past, always do little normal things, or things are normal for them. So like, but show me that I belong. Like, for example, whenever someone brings like a dessert to the office, people will often have a separately wrapped one just for me.
Yeah.
Or they'll say, I bought a box of donuts. Kobe, do you want to get the first one before other hands get into it?
Yeah.
And those are things that, to me, that's a perfect example of normalizing someone's quirk, and it just being the standard practice of just like, of thinking about another person and knowing them and taking the time to know them well enough just to do little things that show them that, yeah, you're not just accepted, that's just who you are, and we're cool with it, and that's what, and that's why you belong. And I think that is probably the essence of what the experience should almost look and feel like on a micro level. And that's the thing about, I think, why belonging can be challenging, talking about it from the workplace, is because it is experienced at the micro level.
Mm-hmm. Well, and workplace solutions tend to focus on the organization and not the individual, right? What is it from a broad strokes? What is one thing that we can do that will affect everybody? It may not affect everybody equally, but it's kind of the idea of the greatest amount of good for the least amount of effort.
Yeah.
Right. That's how a lot of our workplace solutions, well, not our workplace solutions, but little plug there for Roman 3 solutions. But that's often how we collectively think about making changes to the workplace, is what is one thing that I can do that will impact as many people as possible. But belonging doesn't happen with mass approaches. It happens, like you said, at the individual level. And it takes effort.
Yeah.
But it's not that one person in the organization is responsible for creating the perfect solution, because there is no one perfect solution. It's about everybody in the organization understanding that all of us have quirks. All of us come from different experiences, different backgrounds, different race, religion, creed. It doesn't matter. We are all bring ourselves. We need to bring our true selves to work. And that we talked a little bit about diversity. I also want to kind of mention, like, without belonging, you can't get diversity of perspective. If people feel like they have to conform or hide who they are to meet a superficial standard that the organization sets, then you're only going to get perspectives and opinions that already align with your preconceived ideas, or with this avatar that you've created.
Right.
But if you can accept people for who they are and what they bring, diversity of perspective can bring so many benefits to an organization. Because as people share their experiences and as people share who they are, that's you're able to take advantage of huge innovations, new ideas, new ways of doing things, as well as just the tremendous benefit of having a workplace where people actually feel connected to each other.
Right. And I think that and that's a really good case for the benefits that belonging creates. But I think that what would be is really helpful for people to understand is when belonging in the workplace happens, as you said, it's not one person. It's not the CEO responsible for every one of his 1,000 employees to feel like they belong to him and to every other person in the organization. What belonging in the workplace actually means is belonging in your everyday.
Mhm.
That your team that you deal with every day, the managers that you see all the time, the colleagues that you interact with on a daily basis, those that are part of your everyday, that's the collective that you need to feel connected to and belonging with. It's not about creating this massive initiative where every employee in office on the East Coast has to be best friends with everyone on the office on the West Coast, because that's impossible to do and impossible to sustain. It's just about that people can bring themselves to work. It's almost like we have to change our default thinking that everybody is professional as their default to everyone's kind of a weirdo as their default, and we have to be cool with that and try and make sure that that we are cool with their weirdness, and that people try and keep their weirdness from not affecting their job negatively,
Yeah.
but letting their weirdness be part of what affects their job in a positive way. And that's kind of, I think, what the default needs to be. But part of that really is about the individual level, that I need to, the people that I see every day, I should be comfortable around and be able, and I should build that familiarity that they know me well enough that we can talk, and that I can, be able to kind of be my weird self and have that just be what is commonplace.
Right. And you raised a couple points. There's one thing that's been bugging me for a little while since I read it. There's one thing that you raised some good points there, and there's one thing that I want to expand on a little bit in more detail, because you talked about the people that I'm surrounded with, the people that I'm in physical proximity to. I should feel connected with, or I should feel like I belong, and that is true. However, there was a recent there's been a number of news articles recently on some comments made by Malcolm Gladwell, who's an author and speaker. And essentially, I've got some notes here that I want to share, because I want to make sure that I'm actually quoting him properly. But his statements were along the lines, he says, if you're sitting in your pajamas in your bedroom, is that the work life you want to live? Don't you want to feel a part of something? If we don't feel like we're a part of something important, then what's the point? And if it's just a paycheck, then it's like, what has your life been reduced to? It's very hard to feel necessary when you're physically disconnected. As we face the battle that all organizations are facing now in getting people back to the office, it's really hard to explain this core psychological truth, which is we want to have a feeling of belonging and feel necessary. And his entire thesis on is that you cannot create belonging unless it's in the workplace, in the office, in a shared physical space. Gladwell's promoting this idea that you have to be in physical proximity to other people in order to feel belonging. And I wholeheartedly disagree. I believe there's several points that he makes that I throughout his talk that I agree with. Remote work has raised some new challenges with how we engage with people, how we make people feel that they belong and are connected to a larger goal. And he's right that purpose is essential to us as human beings, right? Where I deviate in my thinking is actually in many areas, but primarily I want to dispel this idea that the only way to create belonging is physical proximity. Yes, like as you said, when it's easier to when you can walk to somebody's office that's beside you and carry on a conversation. But that's a tool. Remote work is merely a tool, and the way that we create belonging needs to reflect the tool that we are using. And it's a poor carpenter who blames his tools.
Right. And I think that what is, and that is a really good point for us to really kind of, dig into and diagnose kind of what the meaning of that is, because the problem with that is it's almost like the assumption of, well, when you're close to people, that creates belonging. But like proximity doesn't inherently create belonging. There are people who feel completely disconnected, like they're 1,000 miles away from the person sitting right next to them. But then there's also people that are 1,000 miles away that have that good connection and good rapport that they can call someone up on the other coast and feel like they're beside them. So it's definitely a false equivalent when someone says that, when Malcolm Gladwell or someone else says that belonging is only about proximity.
And I know absolute like sound bites are catchy, and absolute statements make for catchy little sound bites. But what in life is absolute, right? Death and taxes. Those are our absolutes, and we've known that for quite some time. Outside of those two things, absolutes really don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
I liked your comment about, we can feel more connected with people 1,000 miles away than we do with people in the same building, because we have experienced this personally. Like we work in our office space is a shared office environment. There are several other organizations that are in the same building that we are. And we have good relationships with many of them, cordial relationships with everybody. But there are some people there who we are in, or I can speak for myself. There are some people there that I'm in close proximity to that I feel absolutely no connection with. right?
Right.
They are in the same building as I am. We smile at each other and, exchange pleasantries of, oh, it's hot today.
Yeah.
But that is not belonging and connection.
No.
Contrast that with, we're currently working with a fantastic guy in Australia right now, and who we have only ever met through Zoom.
Right.
And, we've had several conversations over the last few months, but there's a connection there because there's a sense of shared values, because we've allowed the rapport to grow to a point where we can share some level of vulnerability, or this is who I am and what I believe. Our conversations have really revolved around, our Roman threes approaches to workplace culture, and really exploring. There's definitely some alignment there in the values that we hold and the values that he holds. And that has created a far stronger sense of connection or belonging with that individual than it does with people in the same building as me.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's a really important to state that familiarity and belonging are not the same things.
No, they're
And
not.
I think that, and again, I don't want to, again, I hate to say that, like Malcolm Gladwell, like we took a snippet of his term and where we know exactly what he means. I never want to do that,
Right.
but because like, as you said, sound bites are catchy, but they're not necessarily accurate. But if anyone is thinking that familiarity and proximity are the same thing as belonging, then they're missing the point.
Yeah.
Because it is about the fact that, like, that different people, but also different settings and different organizational structures have to approach creating belonging in different ways. I think if you say that, well, belonging is done in one way, and if you can't make belonging in this one way, then you can't get it. If
Right.
that's part of the argument, then that is a terrible argument to be made, because it's about, like what I said before, the CEO is not responsible for everybody to feel belonging in their 1,000-person organization. It's kind of up to the group that interacts. Leadership needs to be insisting on creating this
Yes.
culture of belonging, but it is up to the manager of the teams to be leading by example. But it's also everyone else's responsibility to show that everyone else's weirdness and everyone else's unique perspectives and views are okay with them, and to allow people to just be themselves. And but to make that happen, that needs to happen in different ways. So yes, it won't look the same doing that in a close-knit team in person. That'll look different than it being a, team across states or across countries or whatever like that. That's not going to be the same, but it's important that you don't take the same approach, that you try and figure out what works and work with the people to help them find out what works for them too.
And that's the key point, is it's not going to look the same. It will likely feel the same, because belonging, that sense of belonging, is a distinct feeling. We know inherently when we are in a group of people, whether or not we feel like we are a part of that group. We have a natural way of sensing that.
Right.
The most important, or the person who will have the greatest influence on whether an individual feels like they belong to a team, is the manager.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a manager of a team, a leader of a team, a leader of an organization, I don't care. If you are responsible for leading other people, it is your duty, it is your responsibility to create the environment where people feel like they belong.
Right. And whether that is leading by example with those you interact with every day, or if it's, intentionally working towards a culture where those that are managers beneath you can make those that they interact with every day feel like they belong.
And
And
it's also about like you have to get to know the person on your team, not just the position that they fill.
Right. So one thing though that I think I kind of want to loop back to, going back to some of the, like, not necessarily the talk from Malcolm Gladwell, but it's almost like the reactions to his talk, is that people are, whether they're correctly or incorrectly, putting meaning to his words, and they're kind of saying that belonging can't happen in work from home or remote working. And I think then that for those that take that takeaway, I think that's a dangerous scapegoat to put out there, is to say that belonging has to be intentionally created, whether you're in person or whether you're remote, in any workplace. You need to be working towards creating it in a way that's going to be meaningful. We've said that a number of times. But if the idea is to say, no, your efforts are fine, managers and CEOs, it's not your mistake of not making the effort to kind of make things work. It's work from home is the villain.
Yeah.
And you have to get rid of that if you want to create belonging. I'm afraid some people are taking that away from this discussion about belonging and work from home, is they're blaming it for it being where belonging is not coming from. And that's not true at all. And I think that it's a dangerous thing to scapegoat the lack of belonging, because honestly, you said it's a tool. Working from home, remote working, that is a tool. And if we are saying that, well, we are saying, you and I, Roman 3 is saying, no matter where you're located, effort has to be made to create belonging.
Yes.
And work from home is not to blame for poor belonging. Work from home requires you to not just use a single approach to create belonging. It requires you to maybe put some more effort into how you do it, but it is not to blame for a lack of belonging.
Right. And that's what bothers me so much about the statements that Gladwell has made, is that whenever I see the statements or the talk referenced, it's always used as a excuse to force people back to the office.
Right.
And it's really frustrating to see organizations latch on to an easy answer that's wrong.
Right.
It is, I mean, well, that's why scapegoats exist, because it's the easy answer.
Right.
What in life, when is the easiest answer really the best answer in life?
Yeah.
Right? You will experience a whole host of new problems if you're forcing people back into the office just because you want to have them under your thumb, or you need to exert that control over the workplace. I saw another statistic recently that said as high as 65% of workers say that remote work or work from home options has directly impacted their decision to accept or reject a job offer. And I'll make sure that we actually have a citation to that statistic in the description, because I want to make sure that that is clear. Like, this is hard and fast data. If you're already, and how so many organizations are already struggling with recruitment, and if you latch on to these easy answers and force people back into the office just because you believe that it's going to create belonging or make your life easier, you're only making other problems worse.
Right. And I think what we'll do is, this work from home is a whole other topic. I think we'll make that maybe the topic of an upcoming podcast, because I think that we can really dig into that. But I think we should probably kind of summarize what are we really prescribing from this diagnosis of the workplace. I think it really is to understand that creating belonging in the workplace means creating belonging in your everyday with the people that you interact with, whether virtually or in person, and making sure that everyone else's weirdness is known, accepted, and becomes normal place. we also have to make sure clear that familiarity and belonging are not the same things, and in that it's about, realizing that proximity doesn't create belonging inherently. Efforts still have to be made. And when it comes to things like work from home and remote working being a problem with it, those are just tools, and a poor carpenter, as you said, blames his tools. So these are the things that I think are really important for people to take away from this conversation, because again, all the stuff is unfolding in their big topics, but I think those key points can really help this help create clarity around this issue.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so that about does it for us. So for a full archive of our podcast and access to the video version of this episode hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.